All right, we are going to continue on here with your mailbag questions from the good people out there here on Locked On Raptors. Your first listen of the day. For those of you picking up the second portion of the video on the Locked On Raptors YouTube page, welcome. Hello. If you missed the first one, you can go back and watch it. And the next part of this podcast will be coming out in the third video with the guys from Locked On Hornets as we break down tonight's game. But let's continue on and get to your mailbag questions that came in. Again, a lot of really good ones that came in here. We'll try to rattle through 2 or 3 before we get to Doug and Walker from Locked On Hornets. So first one here comes from Cameron Hilton. Who is the ultimate get for the Raptors via trade? And why is it Rudy Gobert? Interesting one. I don't think Rudy Gobert is the ultimate get for the Raptors. He would certainly be helpful. He would certainly be the back line of defense that this hyper-aggressive Raptors team desperately needs. Honestly, the Raptors offer the perimeter defense that Rudy Gobert wishes he could have on that Utah Jazz team that is just a bunch of uncles letting blow-bys happen every single time down the floor, hoping that their young, spry French son can, or nephew, I suppose, can block those shots away and sort of maintain the back line. Rudy Gobert would be perfect. You can get the defensive acumen of Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes. You throw in Rudy Gobert behind those guys. I don't think anyone's ever scoring on that team. That said, I don't think that team is scoring very much itself either. And so for me, I mean, the guy who's always going to be my white whale until future, events dictate otherwise, Karl-Anthony Towns is my white whale. The Wolves are too good. I don't think he's going to get dealt. I would not deal him if I'm the Wolves. He's really, really freaking good. He's got like 24, 9, and 4 on like a 9,000 true shooting percentage because he's the most efficient big man we've ever seen. He's incredible. And he would be an absolutely perfect fit next to every one of the Raptors' core guys. The Siakam Towns fit to me is just so dreamy. You get the shooting, you get the rebounding, you get the size, you get a guy who I think in a proper defensive system with proper infrastructure and help, Towns can be at least a passable, slightly above average defender. He's flashed that in the past. As a rookie, he was pretty effective on that end. And then it all kind of went to poop over the course of the last few years, as things tend to do happen with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I think he's good enough that he could be a back line. And then his offense is just so damn dynamic. You could run 4-5 pick and roll with him and Siakam. You could inverse it and have Towns run the pick and roll. Obviously, a pick and pop, pick and roll situation with Towns and, of course, Fred VanVleet would be incredible. You can run a ton of Spain pick and roll where you get like a Scottie or a Pascal diving and a Towns popping for 3. It's all very, very exciting and interesting. Obviously, it's going to take a lot for that to happen. And, the Wolves will have to go into the tank and they'll have to have a disgruntled Towns on their hands. And then the Raptors would have to win a bidding war. It's not happening. It's never happening. And you should probably talk yourself out of it happening. But it's pretty fun to think about the fit. I think of all of the players who even sort of could maybe be available via trade at some point in the next few years, Towns is the one I think fits the most. And that's kind of what I would save my chips for if at all possible. He's incredible and will be an absolutely perfect fit on this Raptors team. Let's continue on. Next question here comes from Sifoidar. Apologies if I'm pronouncing your Twitter handle incorrectly. But the question is, what archetype of prospect would you like to see the Raptors target with their first round pick? This is an interesting one. It is, the Raptors are far away from the draft right now. I know nothing about this year's draft. I will say I do my draft prep in the month before the draft typically, and it's not something I really tend to way too far into. I mostly just take what smart people say and repurpose those opinions and sort of draw my own conclusions from what smart people say. And so I'm probably not the best person to ask this question, but it is an interesting thing because the Raptors have seemingly had a type over the years, a 6'9" dude who can't shoot but can defend. That's kind of been their vibe, except for when they drafted Malachi Flynn, of course. And so you wonder if maybe there's some sort of identity crisis they've got going on with the way they're drafting. I don't think so. Honestly, I think Flynn was a pick that was sort of in service of the idea that Kyle Lowry was on the way out the door soon, and having some insurance in place would have been useful. I think that pick becomes less necessary when Pascal Siakam levels up as a playmaker like this, and Scottie Barnes flashes playmaking acumen. You just rather have those guys with the ball in their hands than Malachi Flynn these days. But I think that was probably the outlier, the sort of exception that proves the rule. The Raptors are typically a team that's going to draft for length and defense and sort of character too as well, right? And then from there, they'll kind of figure things out. So I would imagine, considering they've leaned so hard in Division 6'9", with the potential of Chris Boucher being on the way out the door, I would not be surprised at all if they took some sort of projectable weird, limmy 6'9" dude who doesn't have much in the way of a bag. That feels like probably a pretty safe Raptors pick to me. That said, if they could get some kind of knockdown shooter, someone who just kind of spent his college career flying around screens and knocking down catch and shoots, and someone who could kind of be the bench version of Gary Trent Jr., that might not be the worst thing in the world. Typically I'm all for just drafting for potential and projectability. But in this case, if you're trying to build a proper roster around the guys you have and who you think are going to be around long term, getting some specific skill sets and specialists, I think would be pretty helpful, especially since the Raptors are not going to be picking in the super high lottery. They might get low lottery if things go wrong here down the stretch of the season, but it'll be pretty middling in terms of their pick this year. I would rather just get someone who has like one elite skill, preferably shooting, and then you can kind of go with that. But, again, it's hard to predict her, and it's way, way, way too far away to have any sort of inkling as to where the Raptors will pick and who they'll be eyeing up, and how the rest of this season might dictate what they might want to do there as well. We'll get to one last listener question here, and this one comes from, again, Cameron Hilton, who asks, Scottie Barnes can play all 5 spots, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. Would he be better as a pure point guard or 3? I think we really have to get to a point where we're not really calculating positionality into our conversations about this Raptors team. The Raptors clearly don't care about positions. They don't give a shit about the concept at all, frankly. And it's probably time for us to match that in terms of our discussion of the team. And I don't think the Raptors are going to box Scottie Barnes into being one position, because why would you? I pointed out, I made a tweet that kind of went a little bit viral-ish, I guess, on Friday night when the Raptors, I made a tweet. Good God, I sound old. I posted on Friday that, Barnes is a bruising wing and a finesse center and a flashy point guard all into one delicious package or something like that. And I totally stand by that. Why paint him into being one position when he can be all of the positions, and you can use him and deploy him in all these different sorts of ways? You can use him as a guy that you throw the ball to on the wing and he isos up and finds his own buckets. You can post him up. You can use him from the middle of the floor as a surveyor, as a short roll guy, as a zone buster, as your sort of nominal center on defense. You can run, as they've talked about, with, sort of comparisons to Marc Gasol and the way they used him within the Raptors offense. That is something the Raptors can do with Scottie Barnes, in addition to giving him the ball handling duties as well. So no, I don't think you pencil him into one position. In fact, I think you let him try out all these different things and see what sticks and see what works. And then you'll have this sort of proto-futuristic player who is not tied to any position, can play with any collection of players. It changes the way that you can team build, because instead of feeling like, oh, you got to get a wing or a big to pair with this small forward, you can tailor your acquisitions and realize, oh, we can just get this guy and then move Scottie here, or we can move Scottie here and get this guy here. That's a way better way to go about building a team, to me. And I just think with Scottie Barnes at just 20 years old, there's no sense in putting him on some one single-minded development track at this point. Give him all of the development tracks and see what sticks the most. For me, with Scottie Barnes, the next 2 seasons at the very least, you're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that stuff that sticks will eventually form the player that he becomes down the line, which might be a bit more focused in terms of what he focuses on and what he does the most. But I think Scottie Barnes does so many things so well and has such a sort of outlier body type and size and basketball IQ that penciling him into one position is a very, very silly idea, because he's awesome. And I want to see as much Scottie Barnes in all the different facets of the game as we could possibly see. With that, I'm going to wrap up the mailbag portion of this podcast. We'll come back on the other side and dig into Raptors Hornets with Walker and Doug from Locked On Hornets. Should be a great chat. It'll be available, of course, on the video side in a third video, so keep an eye out there. I'm just testing something out, and we'll see how it works. If you don't like the 3 short videos, just tell me in the comments, and that's fine, and I'll never do it again. If you do like it, however, let me know, and I can maybe start doing it a little bit more often. Either way, that's going to do it for the mailbag part. We will get in a second to the conversation with the boys from Locked On Hornets. But first, let me tell you about our friends over at betonline.ag, who would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue to march towards the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline is the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year, and you got a new desktop and mobile website for you to sign up at today and receive a 50% welcome bonus upon your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts.